the following transactions appears in your sales day book. We have Mr. A 4,500, Mrs. B 3,000, Mrs. C 2,000, and Mr. Z 1,500 for a total of 11,500. Mr. A returned 1,000 worth of items to us at the end of the month. So there is a total sales returns of 1,000. So how do we transfer all our accounts from the sales day book and sales returns day book to our ledgers? So just remember that if we have a sale on account, the journal entry is debit accounts receivable and credit sales. So at the end of each month, we will record the total of the accounts receivable to our accounts receivable and to our sales account. If there are sales returns, we'll record the sales returns and credit it to our accounts receivable. So let's do it. We will debit 11,000 here and credit sales of 11,000. And for the sales returns, we debit the sales or sales returns account of 1,000. Sales returns of 1,000 and credit accounts receivable of 1,000. And in the individual receivables ledger, we will record each of the following receivables from Mr. A, Mrs. B, Mr. Z, and Mr. C. So for Mr. A, we have 4,500, Mrs. B 3,000, Mrs. C 2,000, and Mr. C 1,000. But Mr. A returned 1,000 of the goods he purchased. So we will deduct 1,000 from the receivables ledger of Mr. A. So the receivable ledger of Mr. A will have a total of 3,500. So that is how you transfer your accounts from your sales day book to the main ledger and subsidiary ledgers account. Okay, so let's say that the purchases day book contains the following suppliers: Mr. A 4,500, Mrs. B 3,000, Mr. C 2,000, Mr. C 1,500. So we purchased from our suppliers for a total of 11,000. 11,000. But we returned items to Mr. A in the amount of 1,000. So let's remember that if we purchase items on account from our suppliers, our entry would be debit purchases, and we will credit our accounts payable. And if we return some items to our suppliers, we will debit purchase returns And credit, we will debit accounts payable and credit our purchase returns. So let's record our transactions from our purchases daybook to the ledgers. So we will debit the total amount of 11,000 here, and in the purchases and credit accounts payable in the amount of 11,000. But we returned 1,000 to Mr. A. So debit accounts payable of 1,000 and credit purchase returns of 1,000. So after that, we will also record to our subsidiary ledgers to the individual supplier account. So we have Mr. A 4,500, Mrs. B 3,000, Mr. Z 2,000, and Mr. C 1,500. And to record the return to Mr. A, we put it here 1,000. So the total of our accounts payable to Mr. A is 3,500. Say that we found the following transactions in our cash book: a cash sale of 25,000, payment to suppliers of 6,500, a cash receipt from customer of 1,500. So let's start recording the cash sale. We'll debit cash of 25,000 and credit sales of 25,000. Next, payment to suppliers. We'll debit the accounts payable of 6,500 and credit cash of 6,500. We will also record the accounts to the individual ledger account of our suppliers. We'll remove 3,500 from Mr. A and 3,000 from Mr. C. So as you can see, the amount of our payable ledger from Mr. A supplier is 0 and Mr. C is 0 also. So next we have our payment from our customer Mr. C. So we will debit 1,500 cash and credit accounts receivable of 1,500. And we will also remove to the individual customer account of Mr. C 1,500.